So I should probably start the review as honest and as open as I possibly can, so all you Tool fans can get mad at me right away. I'm not the biggest Tool fan. I think Lateralis is great. I think it is the best album I've heard from Tool, quite significantly, but unfortunately I just couldn't get my head around albums like 10,000 Days. I just found them really monotonous and dull, and Anima was even worse to me actually. I just found everything about it just really stale and quite honestly boring. Pretty basic word to use, I know, but I just couldn't really wrap my head around the really lengthy tracks that didn't really go in very interesting directions, and I just lose interest so quickly. Never really found that with Lateralis though. I do think that album offered something way more unique than what they were doing on their other albums. I don't personally feel like what they do musically at times is very unique. So the huge amounts of praise that they've gotten for their sound is a bit baffling to me. I think there's a lot of alt metal I've heard in my life that doesn't really sound that much different from Tool, and they certainly don't get the praise that Tool get. But anyway, that's really not part of this review because this is their first album in like 13 years. The comeback that people have been waiting for so damn long. I didn't even think this was going to happen. It got announced earlier in the year, but I feel like almost every year there's always rumours about a new Tool album, and Fear Inoculum actually ended up being an album that came, and I was shocked. So far, the response has been very mixed. I haven't watched or read any reviews myself on this album. I never like to before I do my own review, but I do know that quite a few people have said some negative things about this, and I can definitely see why. One thing that surprises me most with this album is that it really isn't much progression from their older work, and I'm sure there'll be some Tool fans out there that will think that I'm talking absolute shit here, but I am not really hearing that much difference from what they've done previously. And you know, we're talking 13 years since they were last making music. I just would have thought they'd have done something different, but they really haven't. If you're a big fan of what Tool were doing before, then I have no reason to believe that you would think that this is some kind of step down in quality, because to me, like I say, I don't feel like this is that much different from what they've been doing. For me, that's an issue though, because I've already said I'm not the biggest Tool fan, and I don't think what they're giving me here is anywhere near as exciting as what I heard on Lateralis. So of course, I'm coming out of this album quite lukewarm. The 10-minute opening track sets up the album perfectly, actually, because what they're giving you here is very much what you should be expecting for the rest of the album. That kind of dreary sound that they're going for here, the kind of like dark tone that we've got going on is carried through the rest of this album. A monotonous vocal delivery that really leaves a lot to be desired for me personally. I just think this guy needs to sing with way more character, because he just really falls in the background instantaneously for me on this album. And for a good chunk of the album, this is what we're getting from his voice. I just find it really sluggish to listen to. He just needs to amp things up occasionally, you know? I just couldn't imagine a world where I'd enjoy this for 90 minutes. Instrumentally though, some of these tracks do take some interesting directions. I think one of the best examples of that is Invincible. I really like the chugging riffs on this track, and for a 12-minute song they do offer something different than some of the longer tracks here, which to me is quite refreshing. And that monotonous vocal delivery I was talking about is completely obliterated on the track Tempest, which is unfortunately the penultimate track on the album, so it does take quite a while for me to finally be on board with the vocals, unfortunately. So much bite to his vocals here. I feel so much propulsive energy coming through. It is just a fantastic Tool song. For 15 minutes as well, I am in awe of how fantastic of a song it is. I mean, they prove themselves time and time again that they really should shorten some of their tracks down. So many tracks should be way shorter, but this is one example where, nah, this should be exactly the length that it is. Unfortunately, they do follow it up with a completely pointless closing track that I just don't see. I just don't see the purpose of. Honestly, it really isn't. It, I don't know. Well, I could also say about the lyrics on this album too. I just feel like a lot of their writing is so contrived. They just throw in so much descriptive language, really for the sake of it. You could just simplify so many of the things that they say, and it would really make the album much better to listen to, especially when you read into the lyrics. You know, the idea of less being more, well, Tool aren't really good at ever thinking about that. And I think tracks like Descending really show it as well. It's just so overly dramatic. Let me read some of the lyrics here. Drifting through this boundlessness, this madness is our own making. Sound our dire reveille. Rouse all from our apathy, lest we cease to be. Stir us from our wanton slumber. Could have really condensed that quite a bit, I think. It reads as a bunch of nothingness, honestly. If this was said in a more interesting way, then maybe it would work much better, but it's just... just really difficult for me to connect to any of that, honestly. Similarly with the opening track too, some of the lyrics across here just don't particularly interest me in any kind of way. So yeah, not really an enjoyable listen for me, this one. Definitely got a bit better with a few listens though, I will say that. I'm glad I didn't just give it one listen and dip and not go back to it, because I think at first I thought it was just straight up bad, but then with a few more listens it got more bearable, but it still isn't anything enjoyable for me, really. I can't really call this a disappointing release because I'm not the biggest fan of Tool anyway, aside from Lateralus, but I will say it's disappointing to see that they're kind of just giving us what they've always given us with this one. Just this many years later, I think a bit of progress would have been nice to see, but that is nowhere to be seen here. Yeah, this is a 5 out of 10 from me. Let me know what you think of this album. Apologies for my throat, I still have a bit of a cold, so my voice probably sounded a bit weird throughout this review. I apologise for that. Don't get mad at me, don't let that discredit my opinions. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Subscribe and goodbye.